There's a wonderful story. This is from the book, The 72 Names of God, a book about Kabbalicism, about a man named Ike, who happened to be a postal employee, carried letters around, and he had a son named David who was very healthy, and then one day suddenly just got very sick. And they took him to hospitals, all around the Midwest. He was a fellow from the Midwest. They drove him, up to all the fancy clinics, and nothing was working. It so happened that in the town that he lived in, there is a faith healer, a wise old man who could see angels, who was very, very spiritually developed. And they finally, grasping a last straw, went to him. And they said, "Can you help us? He's our only son. He's on his last dying days, and we're just going to be devastated if he doesn't live." And the wise man said, "Let me pray. Let me see what I can do." So that night he goes back and prays all night long, and using his spiritual attainment, goes up to the gates of heaven and finds them locked, completely locked. He can't get in, and he's never had this experience before. But he goes, "Well, I guess that's how it is." And the next morning he finds the mailman, and he says, "Listen, I'm really sorry, but the gates of heaven were locked. I think your son's destined to die." And the anguish on the father's face was just heartrending. And finally the wise man says, "Let me try one more thing." Because he just didn't want to give the man no hope whatsoever. He says, "I don't think it'll work, but let me try one more thing." So he goes home and he says to his assistant, "Listen, this is a city 20 miles up, big city. I want you to go find me 10 thieves, pickpockets, burglars, murderers, the worst scum you can find. Go get them." So the assistant is really stunned, but he says, "Yeah, all right." And he goes up there and he says it was really easy to find him. And they'd heard about him and his healing, so they said, "Yeah, we'll come." So he brings them back, sits him in the living room, and he says, "Thank you all so much for coming. I have some very deep work I have to do, and I need your help. Will you all help me?" And they say, "Sure." And he goes into prayer. Well, the story ends by the next morning, the mailman driving up, pounding on the wise man's door, and the wise man opens up the door and says, "Oh, I can see by your face, some good news must have happened." He says, "Yes, my son is alive and well. He's out doing his chores. He's going back to school. It's just a miracle." So he leaves, and the assistant goes to the rabbi and says, "Tell me what's going on here." And so the rabbi says, "Come on, let's go for a drive." And they drive through the town. They see all these honest people, and they see these 10 thieves here and there. And each one of the 10 thieves salutes, tips his hat, and they just keep driving around smiling. And that's the end of the story. Actually, the end of the story is the end of the story is that the assistant says, "Come on, tell me what happened." And he goes, I went up to heaven again, and it was locked, but this time I had the thieves. And they picked the locks, and they're experts at breaking in, and so my prayers got into the altar of God and were answered." Now, what the story means is that the wise man is our own soul, our own light. The 10 thieves are the dark qualities that each and every one of us have. And they are not enemies, but friends, because they are the process by which we will enter heaven. They are the keys that will unlock the doors to heaven as we enlist them and recruit them to be in oneness with us. And that's the process by which faith is created. All the divisions within us, we pull them in, and we love them, and we appreciate them, and they open up the doors of heaven to us.